My skydiving resume looks really short following Angie. But the main thing for you to know is that I have a parachute rigger rating, and I've had that since 2017, and I am, I think, a very active rigger. I'm also an active jumper. I'm not just a rigger, but I'm not a full-time rigger. I have another job outside of skydiving, and I like it that way. For me, being a rigger is a really nice way to be on the drop zone, whatever the weather, to sort of always have something to do on the drop zone. I like having things to do, a bit like you saying about being goal-driven. I like to be doing stuff. So I'm very happy with being a sort of part-time rigger. I'm generally 2-3 days a week, depends what time of year it is. Sometimes I'll be in there for a whole week, sometimes 1 day a week. There are plenty of full-time riggers. So some of you might have come across Dave Gould, who's at Hinton, has been a full-time rigger for as long as I've been skydiving. Somebody like Kim Newton up at Chatteris, one of my rigging heroes. I see her as a bit of a Winston Wolfe of the skydiving world. If there's a problem, she'll come in and fix it. Nikki Johnson, I believe up at Cark. Okay, thank you. You know, he knows everything about line sets. So there are lots of role models out there of riggers who do it full time, but I don't. So I think, like anybody who gets into rigging, I started off as a packer. I started doing a RAPS course in February at a UK drop zone. So inevitably, I got my packing license, my packing certificate straight after getting my A license. And then I found that packing for other people was a really good way to earn money so I could keep skydiving. And it kind of rolled from there. And I got my AP rating, my advanced packer rating. And I think most of you probably know what an AP does. They take your kit away and they bring it back to you. And you don't ever have to look at your reserve. You don't have to know what's in there. They just deal with it. And that's sort of advanced packer role in a nutshell. I think a lot of people don't know that you get different advanced packer ratings. The person who packs your reserve will have their square rating. But you can also get an advanced packer tandem rating, so keeping those tandem rigs with their reserves in order, and then a round advanced packer rating as well. Part of what drew me to getting that advanced packer rating was nothing to do with earning money at all. I really wanted to understand the system that was on my back. I wasn't very comfortable with something I knew nothing about, with something that was hidden. I was really curious. And it seemed a really good way to understand what it is we're looking for when we inspect kit. So if you look at lines, what are you actually looking for? When is a tear on a parachute something that you can just keep jumping, or something that means it needs repair, or something that means the parachute can't be used anymore? They were the kinds of things I was curious about. And doing the advanced packer course was a really good way of starting to learn about that. So that was kind of my way into it. And then I very quickly realised that, yes, you can earn quite a bit of money out of it, because there are all these skydivers who just want somebody else to do it for them. The downside of that is they all want you to do it in March, all on the same weekend, and they don't like taking no for an answer. So yeah, that's my advanced packing really. And I think most people don't know what riggers do, because most of it does happen in a little room somewhere away from the main stuff of skydiving. So just to sort of put it in a nutshell, rigging is all about inspection, repair, maintenance, design and manufacture of sports parachuting equipment, and that's a really big remit. There is a lot that is covered in that. And for me, one of the most important things is that all hinges on having a really wide knowledge and an in-depth understanding of all of that stuff. And I think just the breadth of that is summarised by this list of subject sessions that is actually drawn from the question pool. So if you go for a rigger rating for your parachute rigger rating or your advanced rigger rating, you have to sit a written test before you're allowed onto the course. And it's a long list of questions, and these are the subject headings. So you have questions around thread and sewing, around materials, line and webbing, hardware, AADs, British skydiving rules and regulations, general rigging stuff, tandem stuff, and then things like contamination. And I think that's actually a really good indication of just how broad it is, this in-depth knowledge that riggers have. And of course, as you go through that rigger progression, that knowledge is expected to deepen. So when you take your parachute rigger written test, you have to score, I think it's above 70%. And then when you take your advanced rigger written test, you have to score above 80%. So that's a little indication of that remit for riggers. I'm going to come back to ratings and requirements in a minute, but before talking to you about that, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what it is I love about rigging, because I am actually really passionate about rigging, and I feel so fortunate to have kind of gone into that route because it really suits me. And I know it won't suit everybody, which is good because there's not that much room in rigging rooms. So I'll share a little bit about that and about how I got into rigging. So for me, what I love about it is quite simple. I really love being able to just fix broken things in skydiving and keep people skydiving. I love the fact that somebody can pop their head into a rigging room and say, "Oh no, I'm on the next lift, can you do this?" And you say, "Well, can you bump yourself back a lift and I'll have it done for you." And it's such a wonderful thing to be able to do in skydiving. There are wonderful things about being an AP. There's nothing quite like the buzz of somebody sending you a text message from Spain and saying, "You've just saved my life. What do you want? I'm coming through duty free." You know, or being on the drop zone and watching a student have their first reserve ride, and you know you packed that, and you know that was an okay reserve ride. You know, it's a real lovely thing about AP. But being an advanced packer, for me, it's very much about repetition. You're packing the same rigs, you're unpacking them, you're inspecting them. If you packed them before, you already know them, and you hopefully not going to find anything wrong with them, and then you repack them again and nobody looks at them. And that doesn't really work for me. I like the variety of rigging, and I like the pressure sometimes of rigging to see if you can get something done. So it was a bit of a slippery slope for me getting into rigging. I jump at headcorn, and I cannot show my appreciation for Pete Sizer's generosity enough. So he is one of the very rare riggers in the UK who is happy for people to wander into his rigging room and have a play on his machines. Now, most riggers in the UK would be horrified at that idea, but Pete Sizer is very much about encouraging people, and then he's sort of picking up their mistakes and he's fixing the machines after them, and it's a wonderful generosity. So I was very lucky that when I started to sort of want to fix a few things myself and make some basic things, I made a packing mat and some custom knife pouches. He was more than happy to let me go in there. And I found that I really enjoyed being around that level of expertise, just sort of absorbing some of that incredible wealth of information that he has. It was really worked for me. So I think it's much harder probably for a lot of people to set up that connection with a rigger or a rigging room, and I really appreciate that. I had a real advantage there, and it was just where I happened to be. But at the end of the presentation, I'll talk about some tips of how you can overcome that difficulty if you're interested in this. But first, I really want you to get a sense of whether you are interested in it or not. So I specialise, like most riggers, I think, I specialise in a certain area. My area is in canopy formation equipment and base jumping equipment. I like patching stuff. And both of those kind of jumpers bring me lots of stuff to patch, especially the base jumpers. They crash canopies into all sorts of stuff. So I get things like this. You can't really see it too well on the slide there, but this is a really badly damaged canopy. It's got a line pulled off, it's got rips all over it. And I love the way that people will say, I've messed up my canopy. This canopy had 5 jumps on it when it got hung on a bit of metalwork on the side of a building. So do you think it was fixable or not? The jumper certainly didn't. The jumper was, yeah, quite sure that he had written off his new canopy. And just to give you an idea of the damage, but yes, it was fixable. It's back in service, it's being jumped. And that for me is just such an amazing thing to be able to do as a skydiver. It's not just about the being able to fix it, it's having that understanding that I will take responsibility for this going back out into service. And that's a key thing for being a rigger or an advanced packer, is there's a real high level of responsibility involved and standing by your work. For me, you know, it's a really lovely thing. So this is the kind of work I specialise in. It's work that I find interesting. It's endlessly variable. No 2 canopies are the same. No 2 bits of damage are the same. And you know, it's really tricky problem solving. I really like the problem solving side and the understanding of materials. I also like the fact that base jumpers never quibble with how much I charge. They're just more than happy to get kit back. And you know, sometimes skydivers, they just want to spend their money on skydiving, and we all understand that. So there can be a bit more quibbling about money. And yeah, I think when I look around at the riggers that I know, most people have a niche. So I've dabbled a little bit in stunt work. Karen Saunders is the absolute expert as a skydive rigger. She has really pursued that niche, and it's great to see her do that, and she's another one of my role models. So I think this kind of work can be very frustrating. I mean, I'm sure you can see from that picture that it's not an easy job. You've got to unpick everything. You've got to put a patch in. I think in this one there was 4 patches that all had to come together, and then you have to reconstruct the seam so that it is exactly the same. You're literally wanting your needle to go in each one of these stitch holes when you've remade the work. So really, you want your work to be invisible. It's quite a funny position to be in, that you do all this complex work, but you really don't want it to be seen. So it can be really frustrating. Rigging does require a lot of patience, a lot of being prepared to unpick things because it's a fraction out. Not because somebody's standing there saying that you need to do it, but because you have that drive, that sort of capacity to work at something until you get it just right. And for people like me, that's a really lovely thing. I enjoy that. But it's not just about fixing and making, it's also about research and design and playing and testing things out. This is one thing I recently tested out. I'm not quite sure why that keeps popping up. But just making streamers, being put into use here by a suitably qualified skydiver, Sam Haste. Yeah, the rigging room is just a great place to say, oh, well, could we do this? Yes, we could. Let's try it out. Let's tweak it. Now that these have been flown, I'm working on Mark II because definitely they could be improved, but I have the capacity to do that in the rigging room. And part of rigging is about understanding the context that the work is going out into. So as part of making the streamers, I had to understand the regulations in the ops manual about who can fly streamers, where, in what circumstances, before saying to someone, yes, you can go and jump those. So it's that kind of mixed bag of things. In terms of research and development, it's not exactly skydiving, but it's a project that I've been working on that I've been particularly excited about. So this is actually a base container that I did all the research and development on, and managed to get really geeky about, you know, what do you put for the stiffeners, for the tuck tabs here? Do you want tuck tabs there? Do you want Cordura or alien skin there? And suddenly having the ability to decide on each piece of metalwork and each piece of fabric and each to really understand the dynamics of a harness and why different stitch patterns are in different places, and then to put it all together from absolute scratch and then go and jump it. For me, that's the kind of thing that makes me so excited about rigging. This is before I put the harness and container together. I was taking photographs of it like it was a new child all the way through. But for me, you know, getting into that ridiculously geeky detail and just asking questions about every element of every bit of kit is amazingly satisfying. So of course now I've tested this out in the real world. I'm on Mark II of this as well, and that seems to be where I'm going as a rigger. Is I'm just going to have a Mark III and a Mark IV of every single thing I make that's not for a customer. It's definitely a very niche part of the sport. It's not for everybody. I was talking to Pete Sizer, who's chair of Riggers Committee with British Skydiving at the moment, and he said that we've had 60, as far as he's aware, we've had 63 people qualify as parachute riggers over the last 10 years. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of niche area that it is. And he did tell me how many were women, but I've forgotten to put that in my notes. I think it was 5 women. In fact, yes, it was 5 women qualified. And as far as Pete was aware, all those women are still rigging. So I looked at the slides of characteristics for some of the instructor talks, and I think this is my equivalent. And that would be the characteristic for somebody who gets into rigging, is just this sort of driving curiosity about everything skydiving related. And so to help you get a sense of whether you have that level of curiosity or not, I thought I'd include 5 of those questions from the rigging examination pool. And I'm not really interested in whether you get them right or wrong, but are they the kinds of things you're curious about? I have an incentive here to help you because I happen to have 5 questions and we happened to get 5 prizes. So we're all jumping around air parachutes. Probably all know they have A, B, C and D lines and steering lines. But which are the shortest? Yeah, A lines. Excellent. I will bring a prize your way. Or I might talk Angel into running with prizes. Oh, no, Angel. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, so A lines are the shortest. Let's go to this one next. Velcro comes in 2 parts. It has a pile part and a hook part. The pile is the nice soft part, the hook part is the grabby, sticky part. Which one wears out the quickest? Pile. Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Prize.
Thank you so much.
It's all right, I'm taking names and details and I will be on your case to come rigging. Okay, so why do some reserve parachutes have single suspension lines and most modern mains have cascaded lines? And if anybody isn't sure about what cascaded lines means, it's where you have your A and B lines come down and they join together.
Mary, there's a picture right there that shows.
Ah, thank you. Here. So we have 2 lines, A and B, and then they join here. Now, if you never look at your reserve, you probably wouldn't know that it doesn't have those. Anybody want to have a guess? Oh, Amber.
Yes. Because cascading lines have less drag, fewer lines, so they're faster, but you put more load on one line, so more likely to break. So in reserve, you don't care about drag, but you do care about whether your lines are going to break. So you don't bother cascading on reserve and have more lines. Is that right?
That's absolutely perfect answer. I hope did everybody hear that? Yeah, that was the perfect answer. Could you pass that back, please? If you weren't already signed up for tomorrow, I'd be making you sign up. Okay, what haven't we done? An accuracy canopy. I hang out at a drop zone where we have a lot of accuracy going on, but some of you might not have come across an accuracy canopy. So will an accuracy canopy have a thick or a thin aerofoil, and why? Let's start with thick or thin. Yes.
Thick?
Yes, yeah. Can you add why, or shall we bounce that to someone else?
I guess that it's probably like less aerodynamic, but whereas thin is going to like go through the air, but you don't want that full penetration, I guess.
Yeah, and what would be the advantages of a thick aerofoil, of something that's really grabbing the air? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
Solid weight.
Yeah, absolutely, more stability. I'm going to give the prize to you because you answered first. And so lastly, what's the chord of a parachute? It's a trick question, or a tricky question. We don't usually actually use the term chord separately. We talk about the chord and the span of a parachute.
So the span is this way, but the cord is this way.
Yes, this way being the shorter one, nose to tail. Yes, yeah.
Give it to the other person that did the half question.
No, thank you.
I already got one. Do I give it to someone else?
Oh, sorry, I thought. No, you got one. Of course you did. Right, I'm left with a prize. You'll have to give it to somebody else that you bump into. So, yeah, they're the kinds of things that I think whet the appetite of somebody who's got a leaning towards rigging, that, oh, actually, why? And, oh, OK, that's nice, useful information, and I can apply that to the canopy I'm jumping or the canopies that I've seen in the air. So if this does seem interesting to you, how on earth do you go about getting into rigging, particularly because a lot of people won't know who the rigger is or the riggers are at their drop zone? So Angel, I have to give Angel a lot of credit here for making it possible to have this beautiful progression tree of becoming a rigger or a packer. And because it's not very visible there, also thank you to Angel, I do have some copies of it here. So if anybody is curious and wants to come up and have a look or take a photograph of it, that's great. And it's also on the British Skydiving website, and I'll share the link on the next slide. So basically, packing and rigging progression starts with that approved packing certificate that I think probably all of you, or at least most of you, have got from having your B licence. So you're already part way down that slippery slope. After that comes the approved packing certificate, which is your AP rating, and that enables you to pack reserves, square reserves to begin with, and then you can add tandems and rounds to that. And then we go through basic rigger, parachute rigger, advanced rigger, and then rigger examiner. And this is a really nice sort of set out of what do you need for each of those ratings, you know, what's the commitment, and also what it qualifies you to do once you have that rating. So at the moment, for me as a parachute rigger, I'm cleared to certify other people's AP certificates. I am also cleared for all general maintenance and repair work on main parachute assemblies and the manufacture of new components, and there's certain types of new components. I'm not qualified to do any work on harnesses or reserve parachutes. But I can do that under the supervision of an advanced rigger or a rigger examiner who would be willing to sign the work off for me, that they're happy with it. So again, you know, I'm so grateful for working with Pete Sizer because I built a free bag for one of my containers. He was happy to observe that, to help me with it, and then to sign it off. So that's in use in one of my containers. So yeah, if you're interested, have a look at this in hard copy here or have a look at it on the website. I think a key thing for somebody who's interested in becoming a rigger is to get to know who the riggers are at your drop zone, have conversations with them, do lots of packing, be a paid packer, either at weekends or a few seasons or a day here and there. It's amazing what you learn from looking at different bits of kit. Keep an eye open in packing sheds. Look for people who are packing unusual stuff and ask them questions about it. Make use of these resources here. So I've just put a list on there of different resources, including all the documents that are on the British Skydiving website, and I think they're all quite easy to find. But I think the key thing is just ask questions, just be curious and ask questions. So on that note, has anybody got any questions for me? Yes?
You mentioned you made your own free bag. Where'd you stand with manufacturer's approval on that?
It was a
you
copy.
supersede that?
No, it was a copy of the manufacturer's free bag, and I mean a copy down to absolute detail, and that was why Pete would sign it off. Yeah. No, it wasn't a new design. It can be really hard sometimes as a rigger when you're doing something like that, or even doing the course where you have to manufacture a whole range of items to certain specifications. You can't deviate. You can't be creative at all, and that can be quite hard, that not being able to deviate. But things like that, it's really important that you stick to the manufacturer's design. Otherwise, it would have to be submitted to Riggers Committee and STC for approval.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so which certificate is needed for AFF instructor rating, please?
Oh, the question was which packing. So I'm.
Just your B license.
It's just the B license one. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so it's
You
not
don't need
anything extra on top of that.
No, tandem you need to be able to pack a tandem rig, but you don't need to be able to pack reserves or anything like that to be an instructor.
All right, thank you.
So the formal name for that is your approved packing certificate is what you need. Okay, thank you. Oh, and before we go, sorry, there are 2 spaces left for rigging tomorrow. So we'll do a practical session of reserve packing and a practical session on the machines in the rigging room making something.
What time does that start? Where should we meet you for it?
That's Kate's